Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today. And in reference to your question, obviously I'll be followed by Jay in a few minutes, who's got a lot more detailed information for you. But I want to make it very clear at the outset that the budget proposal that we are presenting to you this morning is not one that I'm excited about. It's not the one that I want to be presenting to you today. It's the one that I believe I'm constitutionally obligated to deliver today. Quite frankly, it's the budget that I'm forced to present to you today because of our inability thus far to enact lasting reforms that we need in this state. The realities of the fiscal cliff are reflected in the budget proposal that's before you, and it represents a loss of revenue from temporary measures passed by the legislature in both 2015 and 2016. So in a few moments, Commissioner Darden is going to go into the details. He will explain each agonizing cut that had to be made in order to balance a budget that is $1 billion less than the current year's general fund balance. Once he's done, I'm confident that none of you will want to be sending this budget to my desk for approval. I don't think it's possible to pass a budget, in fact, that makes cuts at this level. But before I give you a picture of what's in the budget, I'm going to mention a few things that you won't find. There's not a single cut to the Department of Veterans Affairs. This is not an area that I ever want to cut from, but I'm certainly not okay even taking a dime from the Department of Veterans Affairs while we have hundreds of Louisiana men and women overseas at this moment risking their lives for our freedom. We've also been able to preserve funding for our military department and the Inspector General. We've protected Children and Family Services so they can continue their important work. And in fact, last year, DCFS had a record number of adoptions, surpassing the all-time previous record that had just been set the year before. I don't want to slow that momentum, and I know they have an awful lot of other things that they do that are critically important as well. We also protected K-12 schools from deep cuts, so our children's education is not needlessly threatened. Unfortunately, that's where our ability to spare critical priorities from deep cuts ends. As you all know, there's $9.6 billion in state general fund in the current fiscal year. That number falls to $8.6 billion next year. That is the fiscal cliff. We have approximately $3.4 billion of the state general fund that can actually be cut. And as you know, the two big pots of funding on that side of the discretionary state general fund ledger are higher education and health care. And the biggest cuts had to come from those two areas. It's simple arithmetic. Therefore, you're going to find drastic cuts to health care, corrections, higher education, and yes, TOPS. This is because the budget proposal is based on $8.6 billion in state general fund. And it's noteworthy that that is almost $2 billion less than the state general fund in the 2007-8 budget of 10 years ago. And the amount of non-discretionary spending required in law has actually increased greatly over the last 10 years. So I want to be clear. This is not the budget that I want to present to you, and it is certainly not the budget that I want implemented. But these are the choices that have to be made when $1 billion in revenue is set to roll off the books and has not yet been replaced. This is what falling off the cliff looks like. For those of you who insist that we can cut our way out of this, identify the cuts, but be specific. Don't hide behind a claim that the legislature doesn't pass budgets, that you don't make cuts, that all you do is appropriate. That's nonsense. It's your constitutional obligation. I've made more than $600 million in state general fund spending cuts in the 2 years that I've been in office. And if we can identify other areas where cuts can be responsibly made without harming the people of Louisiana, I'm certainly willing to work with you on those cuts. We should always strive to make government more efficient, but we can't sit here and honestly say that this problem can be solved simply by cutting. If that's what you believe, I can respect it, but stand up and show the people of Louisiana what you want to cut. Contrary to what some might say, I'm not trying to use fear tactics. In fact, none of these cuts should come as a shock to any of you, because we've already been here before. This is basically the same problem that I sat here 2 years ago asking you to work with me then on a permanent fix. I did so again last year before the 2017 fiscal session. Let me remind you, this problem exists because the previous administration left us with a $2 billion budget shortfall and a budget that was propped up by using one-time funds, more than $860 million, to pay for recurring expenses. This is a problem that was 8 years in the making. You chose to temporarily patch up the problem for 27 months, and the day of reckoning is at hand. Since taking office, I proposed a balanced approach of cuts, savings, and revenue to address our problems. While we made some incredibly hard cuts, you also chose to pass temporary revenue measures instead of long-term tax reform. I was promised, more importantly, the people of Louisiana were promised, that those measures would serve as a bridge until the 2017 fiscal session. But when the legislature had the opportunity to dive deep into the budget and make necessary reforms, with the benefit of recommendations from a task force that you created specifically for that purpose, you didn't take it. In fact, not one bill based on the task force recommendations to advance tax reform and address the fiscal cliff ever made it out of the Ways and Means Committee in the 2017 fiscal session. Not one. So the problems haven't changed, and the solutions haven't changed. The only thing that continues to change is the amount of time that we have left to summon the courage to make the tough decisions. And our window of opportunity continues to shrink every day. I know this isn't easy, but I also know it's not going to be easier later. And the longer we wait, the more damage we cause. To say that I am frustrated would be an understatement, but I suspect that's true for many of you as well. And I know it's true for the people of Louisiana who want and deserve for us to fix this problem. They've sent us here to make difficult but sensible decisions, and I believe it's time that we must fix the structural issues plaguing our state. There's still time to come together and responsibly get this done. That's the good news. We need to do it in a special session next month. On that, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and I are all in agreement. The responsible thing to do is to fix the cliff in a special session in February. If we wait until June, all of our state agencies and partner hospitals will have to assume that this is the budget that's going to be implemented, and they're going to have to plan accordingly and make decisions, including the reductions to staff. And this comes just when we're showing signs of life with lower unemployment. We would be taking a dramatic step backwards. We will risk receiving more credit downgrades. Families are going to have a difficult time planning for tuition costs, and thousands of hardworking private sector employees will receive layoff notices on about May the 1st. However, while I agree that we need to do this in February, I'm not willing to call a special session just for the sake of calling it. I will insist upon an agreement in principle between myself and legislative leadership on a permanent and responsible fix to the cliff. I've already told you that I'm willing to be extremely flexible, and I believe that I've proven that to be the case. So work with me. Tell me what aspects of my plan you can live with, and for the parts that you can't, bring me your own plan. I welcome disagreement, but let's not disagree for the sake of disagreeing, and let's try to disagree without being disagreeable. Offer your own ideas. I welcome the discussions. In fact, I've pleaded for them. We can find common ground, but as I sit here, I do not have a plan or any part of a plan from House leadership that addresses this cliff. I cannot negotiate with myself. It doesn't work that way. I've been traveling the state for the past 6 months discussing our budget issues with business leaders and local elected officials all over the state. And I have to tell you that I received the same feedback from just about every one of the individuals with whom I met. They want us to fund higher education and workforce development. They want a healthy workforce. They want us to invest in Louisiana's roads and infrastructure so they can get their products to market. They also want a tax system that is predictable, stable, and fair. And they want us to stabilize the budget and invest in our priorities so they can plan for the future and know that their long-term investments will yield a profitable return. This budget, this year, should serve as a turning point for our state. Make no mistake about it. We have real momentum today in the state of Louisiana. Right now, we have fully stabilized higher education. We have fully funded TOPS in the current year. And because of that stability, all of our higher education systems are seeing a significant increase in admission requests for next year. By projecting funding for higher education, we're also able to land the largest economic development deal in our state's history in direct permanent jobs at one site, DXC Technology in New Orleans. By the way, it was the second best economic development deal in the country last year. Would not have been possible had we not stabilized our state general fund support for higher education. And workforce development will be the key to future investments as well as job growth and job creation. Our unemployment rate is at the lowest point it's been since May of 2008. We are actually seeing wage growth as well. Our state is undeniably doing better, but even more important, so are our families. And while we still have a ways to go, and I'm the first to admit that, there have been positive developments relating to our budget. And in fact, we closed the books on the last fiscal year, my first full fiscal year in office, with a $123 million surplus. You just discussed that. REC upgraded the forecast for the current fiscal year by $153 million, meaning for the first time in many, many years, no destabilizing mid-year cuts to state agencies to higher education. Moreover, REC upgraded the forecast for next fiscal year by $233 million. This is positive. It is helpful. It's certainly much better than making a change to the negative, which adds to the scope of our problem. But it does not come close to solving our problem, which is the cliff. Now, the fiscal cliff is $994 million based on the most recent REC forecast. The difference between the current REC forecast for this year's budget and the current forecast for next year's state general fund, $994 million. The temporary revenue falling off the books June 30th, however, and that gives rise to the cliff, is actually $1.38 billion according to the House Fiscal Office. Because of the improved forecast, I propose to replace only $994 million of that $1.38 billion with permanent revenue. Surely we can do this. But even when we do, as Jay's going to mention to you in just a moment, there will still be painful cuts. Tax reform that produces a structure that is stable, predictable, and fair and permanent, and one that replaces $1.38 billion with $994 million, we can do this. As you've heard me say time and time again throughout the state over the past year, I believe Louisiana is on the cusp of prosperity the likes of which we haven't seen in decades. I still believe it. I'm as optimistic today as I have ever been. But I call upon you, let's join together. Let's prove that we are not Washington, D.C. The federal government today is needlessly shut down as congressional leaders have proven themselves either unwilling or unable to sit down and talk, and more importantly, to listen to one another. and to compromise. Rather, each side plays to their base, and neither is sufficiently concerned about the country as a whole. And I actually think there's a majority in Congress to do everything that each side says they want to do right now, but the government is still shut down. I happen to believe that about this problem, too. There's a majority in this legislature, in the House and in the Senate, who want to permanently fix this cliff and allow Louisiana to move forward and prosper, and to create the situations where our businesses and our families prosper as well. So let's prove that we are better than what's going on in Washington. Our people demand it, and they deserve it. So Louisiana's ready, and I'm ready. The only question is, are you? Let's get it done.